Hello and welcome to this week's HealthTech Hour with me, Steve Roest. Each week, we bring you the best news, views, and interviews with the leaders, clinicians, CEOs, and founders that are changing the face of the healthcare industry in the UK and beyond. As regular listeners will know, I'm the founder and CEO of a health tech venture myself called PocDoc. Our mission at PocDoc is to stop cardiometabolic and renal diseases from overwhelming healthcare systems, starting by making cardiovascular screening universally available to all with our Healthy Heart Check. If anyone would like any information or would like to get a kit themselves, please head over to pocdoc.co, that's pocdoc.co, and you can learn all about the wonderful work we've been doing with the NHS and pharmacies all across the UK. Now, thanks as ever to everybody listening, whether you are listening live on the fabulous UK Health Radio, or if you're listening on demand through any of the podcast channels of your choice. We thank you to everyone listening all over the world. So we're being listened to now by people in over 50 countries each month, and it's growing, which is fantastic. So we must be doing something right. I also would like to say thank you to Johan and the incredible team at UK Health Radio for this live platform. We really appreciate it. And please do check out all of the other shows on UK Health Radio. There's some fantastic other presenters doing amazing things, as well as you can get every single UK Health Radio show, not just ours, on the UK Health Radio channel on any of the podcast channels that you want. So search for UK Health Radio, or you can listen to us directly at HealthTech Hour. So today's show, we're going to focus on a theme, which isn't necessarily something we've done very often, but I really wanted to bring these two individuals onto the show. And so we've kind of grouped it around the theme of post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic growth, maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't, but I'm going to define it as the process by which someone comes back stronger and more positive as a result of a traumatic experience. Trauma being subjective, but some kind of terrible, horrible experience. How they focus on the positives despite the tough and horrible situation that they've come from. How do they keep going forward? And how do they become and maintain themselves as a force of positive energy in the world where no one would really fault them from shrinking away if that's what they chose to do? To help discuss this, as I said, I've got two amazing people on the show. I'm lucky enough to have known both of them for a really long time and worked with both of them in one way or another across two of the ventures that I've been involved in my career. In the time-honored tradition of age before beauty, Peter Cowley is a serial entrepreneur, investor, and startup legend in the Cambridge area. He's invested in 75 different companies. He must have helped hundreds of founders in his time with their entrepreneurial journeys, often just for free because he's a nice person and wants to help entrepreneurs on their way. He's been instrumental in the history and story of PocDoc. Now, I can't thank him enough. He's written 2 books, runs and cycles, and is the father of 3. And in December 2021, Peter was diagnosed with lung cancer without having suffered any previous symptoms and a non-smoker, to find that it had already metastasized to his brain, bones, and other organs. After that, he launched Project Cancer, which is his platform to talk about his own experiences and allow others to share their experiences to try and help anyone suffering or the families of anyone suffering in understanding more about what's going on. He's written about things, vlogged extensively, been featured in multiple national newspapers around his journey, and he's about to publish another book. My next guest, Craig Maxwell, is the commercial director of Welsh Rugby, a hugely influential commercial voice within the Six Nations organization and competition, and has been responsible for guiding the Welsh Rugby Union through some very tricky financial waters over the last decade in one way or another. At 40, Craig was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer called EGFR, and a father of 2. Since then, Craig has embarked on a series of incredible challenges, including one that coincided with the Six Nations this year. He's currently raised over £400,000 in his drive to make genetic testing for lung cancer more widely available in Wales, but also more broadly. So lots to discuss. But Peter, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm very good. Yeah, like Craig, we live on 3 monthly scans. So we have our scans, we get Scanxiety, a word that many of the audience might not have heard beforehand, of different amounts. I think Craig gets it a little bit more than I do from what he's just said. My wife gets it a lot more than me. When we were sitting in the oncologist waiting room the other day, she was completely in the zone. She wouldn't listen to me at all. And then we got the good news, so we can carry on for another 3 months. And we're heading off after the book launch tomorrow. We're heading off to the Rockies for 5 weeks hiking in the US Rockies. So yeah, I'm pretty good at the moment, as you're also aware. I've done a couple of half marathons recently. So yeah, I'm very lucky that the drug I'm on, for me, is working really well.
And when you say Scanxiety, is that did you make that word up, or is that a thing?
No. It's been around. Who knows, mate? I don't know. Craig, do you know who made it up? No.
No, but it's definitely within the group of patients that Peter and myself are. It's definitely a word and a term that's used a lot by a lot of different patients. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's good to hear things are going well. So, Craig, how are you? How are things with you?
Yeah, no, I've been good, thank you. I just recently finished my latest challenge. We're now moving to the next second phase of the foundation. So we launched the Maxwell Family Genomics Foundation, and so far we've raised 1.4 million for that. So we're now moving into the fun bit of looking at how we spend that money, actually, which is going to be great, and that's coming up now in the next few weeks. But first and foremost, as Peter said, I've got in the next 2 weeks I've got my scan coming up. And my life, and same as Peter's, I'm sure, it goes from 3 months to 3 months. So I've got a list of things I want to do in the next 3 months from May onwards, but I can't push go on any of them until I know that I've not progressed and my cancer's under control. Otherwise, I'll be starting chemo probably in May, and that changes the outlook for me completely. So starting to get a bit tense. Every day you get closer to the scan, you get a bit more tense. But no, all good, thank you.
And is there some process by which you get coached into thinking or explained how this will work, or have you both sort of ended up dealing with it in what sounds to be like a relatively similar way? We can dig into it a bit more, but this kind of like 3-monthly mindset, is that something that someone takes you through when the diagnosis happens, or did you evolve to that point yourself because it's the logical way to approach it?
Shall I go first?
Sure, Peter, why not?
Yeah, so I'm very different, and people should be aware. I'm actually on the board of PopDoc with Steve, so I see Steve and Kieran, his wife, regularly face to face. Well, usually on Zoom, but face to face. So they've experienced some of this. The first 3 months, or rather, the first month after diagnosis, was tough, really tough. I was on steroids for nearly 3 months, bloated heavily, very bad sleeping, really tetchy apparently, though I didn't notice it.
To be honest, Peter, I couldn't actually tell.
Thank you very much, Steve. And in the first month, I thought I'd be dead within a month because, I mean, I don't know if you're on the same Facebook group as me, Craig, but there was somebody who died within the month recently. He was diagnosed, and he was a bit younger than you, Craig, as well. So it can be really tough. So trying to get all the life in order, and then getting to the point where actually starting to believe the drug was working, because of course you come off the steroids, the drug comes in, and there's this sort of funny situation at that time. Is it going to work or not? Because the drug we're both on only works for 80% of people. And so then you have some scans. I was actually in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia at that point when the oncologist rang me, weird, because I was trying to carry on with life at an angel event. And he rang me to say it had worked. The big tumor, the one in my brain, which was 27 millimeters, was down to about 9 millimeters already, even after 3 months. And then I started the process of settling into 3 months by 3 months.
And what was it like for you, Craig? How did it go for you?
Yeah, sorry, I'm coughing a little bit today as well. Exactly the same, really. So, I will probably come on to it, but I think my journey started actually, I was told I didn't have cancer.
Oh.
So I had 2 failed biopsies, which is what motivated me for my whole journey. But maybe we'll come on to that a little bit later on. But
yeah, as you wish, yeah.
But I think for me then, similar to Peter, really, the first 3 months of going on osimertinib, I was trying to live normally, but it's hard not to think about anything else. And I think about everything that's going to happen and the fear around if this drug doesn't work or not, because it is a pretty special drug if it works for you, and pretty amazing in that space, really. And I'll never forget, actually, me and my wife went into the oncologist, and our oncologist was away. And it's amazing how you persuade yourselves of things, isn't it? Now, so our oncologist was away on holiday, so we got told we were going to meet a different oncologist. So I persuaded myself that's because there's bad news. And I didn't sleep at all, nothing. I was done. nothing to do with that. Oncologists have holidays as well, which I forgot about. But my oncologist just literally was on holiday the week that my results came in. So I saw a different oncologist who assumed that I'd had the results, which were great news. So I'm literally sat in the meeting.
Okay.
First 10 minutes go by, we're chatting about a few things. Again, some of the people were chatting about, I've got a tumor in my first rib as well. So we're chatting about that and stuff. And then he said to me, is the drug's working? He said, oh my God, yes, sorry. Yes, 80% reduction in tumors. Great, and then there's a whole new story kicks on from that. But then, and that's what starts the 3-month cycle then. And, it's difficult. And there's a really strong part for this for me as well, which I'm learning to cope with, which is mind over matter here, because I've gone into some of my scans after 3 months, convinced it's spread, it's everywhere, the end is here.
Okay.
And they've actually been some of the best results that I've had. And that's been quite a incredible journey for me, is actually understanding the power of my own persuasion.
Right. Or negative persuasion, right? How
and positive okay. Though, and then using that for good
right.
as well. But yeah, no, the 3-month piece is difficult. It's difficult.
How is it quite? How is it kind of weird to be living with this thing or these things inside you and sort of having a relationship with them, almost, that you have to work through and manage and control, almost like it's a chronic condition, if that makes sense? Is there an element of that to it? I don't know if that's a weird thing to say.
Effectively, it's a chronic condition for 3 months, and then it may become an acute condition, of course. And as we both Craig and I have had other therapies, so in both cases it's mutated after a while. I think Craig said about a year. I had about a year and a half, and then we had some other therapy of some sort. And then, but we're both waiting it to getting to the point where actually it's going to be take too fast for us to continue on the current drug, and there'll be chemo and immunotherapy kicking in. And that is the point where things do change a lot. And that's what the Scanxiety is about, being told that there's been mutations or growth in such a way we can't live on this wonder drug, this tablet we bought. This is a blue tablet. Different reasons.
Yeah, which blue tablet are you talking about?
It's actually pink. This tablet we take that was a joke.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, it's a safe space. It's a safe space, Peter.
It's a tablet we take every day, which has a level of side effects. In my case, very, very few. Some people, it's terrible. And so, yeah. But what I've also got just on top of that is a 500-day plan from the point of first mutation to death, because that's the average time based on research. And I'm about 2/3 of the way through that. So I've got 200 or so days left there. So I'm working on a 3-month cycle. And just in case I end up dying at the sort of statistically average, inverted comma, point, I've got a lot of other stuff going on.
Okay. So at what point after your diagnosis did either of you, maybe we'll start with Craig, because Peter, you just talked, at what clearly terrible, awful situation. At what point do you start to, or did you start to think, actually, this is, I don't want this to take away my own agency? Or what was that process that you went through because not everyone who gets cancer goes off and launches a foundation and does challenges and has a 500-day plan and does all of these different things. I guess I'm trying to, at what point was there a tipping point for you, and what was that sort of motivation?
To answer that for me, I probably need to go back a little bit and talk about my journey to getting diagnosed, if that's okay. Because
please.
So I for 6 months leading up to, and I'll give you the short version because of time, but obviously for 6 months leading up to my diagnosis, I wasn't feeling right, back and forth to doctor, chest x-rays, but just wasn't, nothing major, just wasn't feeling right. Long COVID, all those things being thrown at me. Obviously they weren't looking for lung cancer at the time, but nothing came up. And then I did a bike ride from Cardiff to Paris, and I started coughing up blood. And the bike ride, came back to my wife and said, there's something not right here. I don't know what it is, but it's not right. Went to out hours doctor, and they found a 8-centimeter tumor in my lower left lobe.
Okay.
And that was the start of the journey. So from there, then the amazing doctors and nurses had me in the next day. This was late Saturday night. Endoscopies, brain scans, CTs, everything, complete, amazing services. Obviously, biopsying in the lung is very difficult, especially where some people's tumors are, without effectively cutting you open really to be effective in that position. So my first bronchoscopy that happened came back and it wasn't cancer. So they thought that I had organizing pneumonia. Similar to Peter, I was put on a series of steroids, swelled completely, really struggled with them. Again, I knew how grumpy I got there, Peter. I definitely, I got really grumpy. But I literally started to feel like I was, I felt like each day I was dying. I felt like this, I'm oh my God, I'm dying here and there's nothing going on. Had another bronchoscopy because I wasn't improving, didn't work. So then I had a needle guided biopsy where a needle went in my back all the way through and into my lung in a CT scan machine. High risk of lung puncture, high risk of other issues. If they hit a blood vessel, it can cause a stroke. Loads of potential issues that come with it. And that was successful though in sampling and biopsying the tumor. And then it came back as stage 4 EGFR, but I also had a lesion in my shoulder and in my ribs. And they believed my liver, but it wasn't in my liver, luckily. So we went from not having cancer to it being something else, to it being stage 4 and terminal within those 78 days.
Wow.
I then had to wait another week for the mutation, the genomics testing to find out what the mutation type was, which was really important because, Peter and I have both got EGFR mutation drivers, which osimertinib responds to, and is a special drug for that, really.
Right.
But that's what drove me. After initially the diagnosis happened, and for me it was, I can't change it. I've got cancer. I can't change it. No matter what energy and time and how sorry I feel for myself I put into it, I'm never going to change it. And then one of my friends said a line to me, and he's not one of these people that normally comes up with these beautiful, wonderful, inspirational lines, but he sort of said, listen, this could be the end or it could be the start, and then you can choose that. So I just thought, what can I put my energy into? And I thought, well, I'll put my energy into, actually, I can't change I've got cancer, but I can change the way in which I was diagnosed. And that's what drove me on. And that's what drove me on was to sort of say, right, are there any other families in Wales that will be in a similar position to me? They've got 2 young children, that we can just make this a better process for them. Really keen for me to say it was at no fault of any doctors or nurses. What I received was fantastic. It just wasn't, the right technology wasn't available to them to help to biopsy me quicker. Which is where I then put my efforts in to drive that forward. And that experience, whilst it's provided me with a shortened life, it's also given me purpose in that period as well, and is what drives me forward.
And how did you come up with your plan, or when did it start? Like, because you come a long way since you started, but what were the beginnings of it?
So the beginnings of it were on the drug for about a month, and I started to feel better instantly, and I was still running and still active. So I decided I'd wait for the first 3 months, as a theme here, isn't it, to make sure that it was working. But I picked the phone up to an incredible gentleman called Tom Crosby, who's head of cancer services for Wales. And he didn't know me. Picked him up randomly. I told him my story and I said, I want to help. I want to help these amazing doctors and nurses that are trying their best to get us on treatments quicker. And as Peter said, I'd met a family who had lost somebody within the period from finding the tumor to diagnosis. Their diagnosis came, and unfortunately they'd gone within that period, that's 78 days.
Wow.
And Tom said to me, he agreed that the wait time was too long for diagnosis, and they had a plan. And it was called the Quicdna, which was a simple blood biopsy, which could effectively detect late stage cancer. Now, there is an issue there, it's late stage cancer, but could detect it. They'd raised already millions of pounds for this pilot to cover all of Wales, but they're about £300,000 short. So within that sentence was my purpose. I sort of said, right, fine, I'll raise the 300,000 for you.
And how does the technology actually work?
Again, I'm not technical, but effectively, a company called Illumina are working with Velindre Cancer Centre to roll this out across all the health boards in Wales. And it effectively, when you have a tumour that is stage, I believe 3 or 4, it sheds. It sheds DNA. So effectively what the blood test can do is it can detect that shedding, and it can tell you which type of mutation that it is from these shedded cells of the tumour. Now, early stage cancers doesn't work for yet. But even just to take that would take my diagnosis if I was to go in now, because that pilot scheme is now launched in Wales. It's in certain health boards. It would take my 78-day diagnosis down to 26 and maybe even less.
Wow.
Which would get me on treatment sooner. Could stop progression. Can make a dramatic difference. And
also you wouldn't have to go through 3 or 4 failed biopsies.
No. Those 78 days were the worst days. I've never. Me and my whole family, they were the worst days I've ever had. Even harder than finding out I had cancer was the unknown Because when you have it, you can deal with it. You can put plans in place, as Peter and I have. But not knowing is, especially when you've got 2 young children, is the worst. And, getting back, imagine if somebody said to me now, I could give you 50 extra days.
Right.
Wow. I'd give you anything for that,
Right.
really would, and that's what this could mean. This new test could mean.
That's amazing. That's really incredible. And it's fantastic that extra money that you raised has directly led to it basically launching. That's incredible.
Yeah, I think it's important for me to say, I was the icing on the cake. The hard work was done, and amazing people at All Wales Genomics, Wilindra and the Moondance Foundation had been on this plan for about 2-3 years. So I was lucky enough just to be at the end, just to help give it the final push and to
take the lap of honor and just get them over the top.
All the work. Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Well, look, we're going to break do our first commercial break, and then Peter will come back to you and ask you the same question, which is, what was your tipping point after diagnosis into this inspirational journey that you've since taken? So we'll be back after a 2-minute break with my guest this week, Craig Maxwell and Peter Cowley, talking about post-traumatic growth. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to this week's HealthTech Hour with me, Steve Roest, and my guests, Craig Maxwell and Peter Cowley. So Peter, what was your moment, your tipping point, your journey from the dark place post-diagnosis? I also know that you had other issues that happened during your journey, but what was that moment like for you, and what sort of triggered it?
Yeah, so just to repeat, to go through the same as Craig did, my diagnosis, I was quite different. I'd run a half marathon. 12 days later, I couldn't really walk across the room any longer. I couldn't cycle. And
I
then,
remember.
Yeah, and then I managed to get hold of a GP online. I was online because I had COVID. I asked at the end of the call whether imbalance and COVID went together. He said he didn't think so, so I went to see him physically the next week. And at that point, he got me to walk toe to toe forward, and I couldn't even lift a leg. So he was trying to check whether it was ENT, an ear problem or a brain problem. Decided then it was a brain problem, and that because I at this point was spending a little bit of money on it. It was a private GP. I found a private neurologist who was a friend of his within 4 or 5 days. So my journey was much compressed. So it was only 32 days from that point where I'd shown that I had a problem to osimertinib being prescribed. I also had a biopsy which failed, and since then I've actually been to a conference and spoken to the guy who was inside my throat, and he pulled stuff out, and it was all dead. All the tissue was dead. So I was then the same as Craig. It was circulating tumor DNA, which determined the type of cancer and the mutation, etc., and therefore osimertinib was diagnosed. And this is all the book. It's all described in quite a long detail in the book, and also actually on the website. It gives a summary of that. So that's my journey. So it was shorter. So I was very much luckier than Craig. It turns out, with hindsight, I was coughing up a bit of phlegm for several months before that. But I'd spoken to 2 GPs about it, and because it was clear, they said, "Don't worry about it."
Okay.
So at the time it got to and I don't know whether you're a smoker or not, Craig. No one was ever a smoker. I wasn't. And for most never smoker lung cancer sufferers, we get diagnosed only when it's metastasized all over our bodies.
And why is that?
Because we don't cough up blood or stuff. Stuff doesn't come up. We're not used to bringing stuff up. Well, that's what I've been told. So
you're also in. I guess you would also be in, like, technically a very low risk group for lung cancer.
Exactly. Yeah. It wasn't misdiagnosed with me, though, of course. It was just, they found the secondaries first in the brain, and then thought, this is almost certainly not brain cancer, thank goodness, because that's really bad news. Right. And then found the primaries. So I went through a journey of, and you were probably on the list, Steve, or Kieran was, of putting a web page up on my website, which was private. So I gave a password to people, and it was just a journey of what I was going through, which saved me talking to all the friends and all the WhatsApps and everything else. They could just look once a week and just see how I was getting on. And then I started to think, well, I've given a lot to entrepreneurs. As you said, hundreds of mentors, hundreds of entrepreneurs. I've written a couple of books, which have been sold, thousands of them. And there must be something I can help somebody else with. So I decided in about 6-7 months after diagnosis, I'd go public with it. So I created this YouTube channel called Project Cancer. And I've done quite a lot about my own journey on there, but I've also interviewed a number of other people who either are carers or have lost somebody to cancer. I did a podcast with my oncologist, for instance, through the Roy Castle Lung Cancer Foundation, because he's a trustee there. And that went public, but I still couldn't work out who the audience was for that. I might even talk to you about that, Steve, at some point. And so gradually, and then I had this second tragedy. You probably don't know, Craig, but I've lost 2 children to suicide. So this was 10 months into my cancer journey. Alan took his life. Alan, I think you've met Alan.
Yeah, I did.
And then, of course, the cancer becomes minor. That's why I call it Project Cancer anyway, because I'd already lost a son back in 2009. So cancer is something I can work with the NHS to try and work together to help each other. It's a joint venture, I call it. And then later on, I decided I'd share what I've learned, this post-traumatic growth. We'll come into that more later. But so to answer your question, about 6 months it took me to get my head around the fact that I was going to be public about it and I could help others.
Yeah, I think we definitely looked at those web pages that were password protected, and it did, and I think they served their purpose, which is we could learn about it without bothering you so much. Because with any terrible or negative situation, people care, but they're worried about asking a little bit, and they don't want to be a bother and don't want to force the person to relive the trauma necessarily over and over again. So what and I remember working with you during that period and being kind of amazed that you were so dedicated to continue working. And was that a conscious choice, or was it just you didn't really know what else to do, so you just did the default, which was to keep working?
This is covered a lot in the book. It's to do with busyness with a Y. So when I'm a recovering alcoholic, as you know, 24 years without a drink, and my recovery process, because if you stop drinking alcoholically, there's an awful lot of hours left in the day. Literally, you suddenly find you've got 8, 9, 10 hours left. And what on earth are you going to do with those if you're a busy, active person that wants to do stuff? And I got busy with that. And that's also, so that is a coping mechanism. I wouldn't recommend it as a good coping mechanism for everybody, but because I'm, genetically probably an addictive personality or addictive person, then getting busy helping others was a sort of a thing that I did. And that made a huge difference, which was after Ian died back in 2009, I went to a meeting the same day I heard, this is because I just needed a distraction, really. This is, where I wasn't using alcohol as an anesthetic, I was using helping others, being busy. And so, yeah, that's what I did. So I just carried on with life. And same, Craig said that as well, didn't he, a few minutes ago? He carried on, tried to carry on as much as normal with the interference that one has from the health system, the scans and the visits and the bloods and all the rest of it. But for me, that really helped. Rather than disappearing into a ball and just hiding away.
And was that similar for you, Craig?
Yeah, I think for me, I was always a very busy person, always really committed to my work and my training, and for me, I sort of had this whole process where I thought, okay, I'm not going to let this win, and it's a stupid thing that I do, where I sort of I say to myself that cancer picked the wrong body when it picked me, so I'm going to show it that I'm going to keep working and I'm going to keep training, and whilst that's hard and whilst I haven't been able to achieve all of that, and sometimes it's stupid and I've done too much, that's what kept me going. It's exactly the same as Peter. I think if I just stopped and truly allowed it to sink in what was going on, I think I'd have struggled. But there was also as well, there was something quite I noticed quite quickly around how my persona, my position, and me impacts my family, and impacts them. So my young children, my wife, my mum. My mum was going. My dad's, got quite severe Alzheimer's, bless him. So my mum's already dealing with that, and is a full-time carer. So the minute they saw me down, it just brought them down, and then it brought them down. And I just thought, I need to take more responsibility in my personal impact here as well. And that's hard at times, but that definitely did help me to keep going. And same as Peter, helping other people, and that was my immediate family and even my friends to that extent, So keeping busy for me has definitely been the key and the secret. But that does get harder, and I don't know how Peter finds, but there are some days, probably more lately than not, where I just think, what's the point? And it is getting harder as time goes by, because you are selling to yourself every day as well.
Right.
Which is where sometimes where I think it just you need to have a bit of a balance with it all.
And
Try to.
is that where your mind over matter thing comes in?
Yeah, I think it's again, it's the 3 months thing. When you get close to those scans, those thoughts do come in. But for me, when I feel like that, I tend to try and go and do something. Like I jump on the bike, I'll try and run, or I'll set up a new challenge, or I'll game same, to not the same extent as the sorry situation that Peter had. But I'll go and have a meeting, or go and do something with the charity to keep myself busy and to fulfill myself within that position, to stop it creeping in, those thoughts, really.
Is it the
Yeah,
same?
I'm really sorry to hear that, Craig. I mean, I don't have these dark patches any longer. I mean, again, obviously I did when Alan died, huge, but for different reasons. No, I think part of this is the fact you've got young kids, and I've got one child left who's 40, who's your age basically, was born in 1984, and so I'm 25, 26 years older than you. So I'm as old as your parents, possibly. I'm much closer to my normal death point. So I've already enjoyed life so much more and given so much more than you've been able to, unfortunately. I feel really sorry that A, that you're so young, and B, that you're struggling somewhat with the down days.
Yeah, and I think that's you've got to try and, for me, my motivation is, how can I fit 10 years of supportive parenting into probably 18 months?
Right.
So that's a real driver for me, and pulls me out of those dark moments as well. Again, talking about personal impact, if you just spend the next 18 months, my kids see me down and sad, well, that's not great role modeling. I want them to see their dad as a positive force and power in the time that he had, really. So that's what gets me out of it. But it's also the hard bit as well, because you think a lot about the bits you're going to miss as well.
Yeah.
I did a podcast with Billy Boyle, who's just done 7 marathons in 7 days, actually, for cancer.
Wow.
His wife died in when she was 37 of colorectal cancer, in fact, and young twins. And she wrote a book which I haven't managed to read. I just end up in tears in the first few pages, called Late Fragments. And if you look it up, there may be something. You're already well on the journey in terms of supporting your young family and doing things, but there may be something in that book that might help you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll have a look at that. Thank you, Peter.
Late Fragments, it's called. Yeah.
So, Peter, when you hear the term post-traumatic growth, what does it mean for you, and how did you interpret it? And would you say that applies to you?
Yes, it's a term that I, as it turns out, had heard back in 2009, because I went to, there's an organisation called Survivors of Bereavement by Suicide, because, as you know, suicide is a very selfish act. It's if it's successful, the suicide attempt, then it's the others around you that suffer. And I went to a conference actually in Derby, and post-traumatic growth was mentioned there, and I completely forgot about it. And then I went to the International Association of Suicide Prevention, which is the global body for trying to reduce suicide, and it was mentioned there more than once. So it's an academic term, really, post-traumatic growth, and the opposite is post-traumatic depreciation. But it is what it says on the tin. So we all know what PTSD is. Post-traumatic growth is somehow converting all the negative thoughts and feelings and grief, in whatever way it is, into positivity. So it's growing from a trauma. And so that's what I've sort of realized. This is my theory. It's not from anybody else. No experts have told me this. That instead of being sort of stoic and resilient, which I do a show an amount from, actually it's more that I've grown from these. I haven't bottled up the grief inside there, whether it's cancer or suicide. I've actually used those in a positive way, in some way. And the people who can do that, which I suspect Craig is doing that, it feels like that anyway, are a bit of, can really, really contribute.
And at what point did your book kind of become into it, your latest book?
So there's a saying that is, there's a book in everyone, and that's where it should stay. It's not.
I've actually, I've not heard that one before, but yeah, okay, okay.
It's not mine, though. It's not my character, and I've already got two, but then we sort of co-authored those with Kate Kirk here in Cambridge, and they're business books anyway. But there was just something that just felt like, particularly after Alan died, that I could provide more. And this book is actually a memoir, but it's concentrating on cancer. So there's a chapter on taken from my YouTube channel about how I cope with cancer, how I work with the NHS, how I've talked to other people, how I've researched, how I've not over-researched, and all these other things. And there's also a chapter on alcoholism and how Alcoholics Anonymous helped with that. The suicide chapters are very different, in fact. But so it's basically a memoir of all the positive stuff. It's called Public Success, Private Grief. I'm not that successful in public generally. I only have 10,000 social media followers rather than the 100,000 that publishers need. But underlying that is the grief. I lost my brother to cancer when he was 21. I lost my sister to alcoholism when she was 52. I lost my first wife, died of pulmonary embolism on an aeroplane, the mother of my children. So I've been unlucky, there's no doubt. But somehow from that, I've concentrated my life on helping others.
And I would say from someone that's worked with you for many years now, the amount of work that you've managed to do is quite astonishing, and the energy levels that you maintain are really, really hard to match. I would say. So yeah, but that must have happened. But you were like that before your cancer diagnosis.
I was. It was the alcoholism and recovery from that changed me. Basically, there was a lot of therapy at the time. So I come from a fairly privileged background, so public school, middle class parents, so Cambridge University. I had I had everything I needed really at that point in life. But I was emotionally very immature until I'd been through the therapy for the alcoholism, and it's from that and looking at the bigger picture that changed. So actually, the suicide of my first son didn't really change the direction that much. It focused in some ways, but it just meant I put more effort into it, I think.
Was that because you were in recovery already for the alcoholism by that point?
I was, thank goodness, I was 9 years in recovery so I didn't. The first thing, obviously, in that situation, as as an alcoholic, and I'm in recovery one day at a time, would be to pick up a drink to anesthetize myself to the horror of losing a child.
And what was it again, I don't think. Obviously, I've got no idea of the statistics, but I suspect it wouldn't be unusual for someone to break their sobriety at that point. So what was it that kept you to it?
Pride and guilt. Pride in the fact I'd had 9 years and I wanted to die sober.
Okay.
Guilt that the effect on Alison, I think you met my second wife, Alison, at some point. The guilt it would be, what effect it would have on my 2 remaining children, on my wife, on my business. I knew what it was like. I remembered what it's like to be not in the gutter. I never got to the gutter. I was still running a business. I was still having some relationship with my kids. I had a girlfriend, but I just knew that was terrible. So it was self-control, strong mental block that if I picked up a drink at that point, it was probably the beginning of the end of my life, as in the next few months after that.
Right. Wow. Okay. Well, we're going to stop for our second break now, and then after that, Craig, I want to come back in and pick up how you really started on this journey to the foundation, which now has got 1.2 million pounds. I undersold you, mate. Sorry, I said it. You only raised 400,000, so I didn't realize you were quite as successful as you were. So we'll be right back after this final break with my guests Craig Maxwell and Peter Cowley. Hello and welcome back to the final part of this week's HealthTech Hour with my guests Craig Maxwell and Peter Cowley. So Craig, what was your identification with the phrase post-traumatic growth? Was it something that you'd heard of before, or do you identify with it? And what's your sort of thoughts about it?
Yeah, no, it wasn't something I was aware of. I think again, it's I definitely do fit into it. I feel like I'm a better and stronger person from my diagnosis. I really do. And I always joke now around, if I was to go back and do my old job as commercial director or CCO, I think I'd have a whole load set of new tools and toys that I'd love to be able to help people more. And I know I'd be a far better leader. a far better employee and a far better colleague from the journey that I've been through. I really would, and it's just a shame I'll never get a chance to do that. But it's definitely something that I've I've experienced. And I don't know about yourself, Peter, and you've had I've only experienced this one trauma, and I'm very sorry to hear your story, Peter. But you've had quite a few in that in that side. But it's quite amazing, and unfortunately, you have to have trauma to become quite comfortable with yourself. Which is where I've become more comfortable with my identity, who I am, and what I can do as well, which I think has just made me a better person within that process. But for me, the whole journey and the growth for me was that real. It was really driven by how I want my children to remember me, and that was the bit that I couldn't get past. I couldn't get past all the bits I was going to miss, or the times I wasn't going to be there when times are hard for them. And whilst my wife will do an amazing job, I wanted to be there with it to support my daughter and my son at 18, 19 when they've got those horrible things that life throws at us all at
Yeah.
some point or another. So again, how can I give them the strongest and best role modeling and show them that when the times were at their hardest, their dad, didn't let it beat him. He rose up and wanted to help others, and really show them what compassion and bravery looks like. And I thought, I can't do that through words. They're 8 and 12. Having those deep conversations with them is just not going to work at this age.
At that age, it's going to be a little bit of a struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you put Roblox down a second, please, Zach? I just need to have a chat with you. So yeah,
Yeah.
but it wasn't quite going to knock it. So I thought, well, I'll do it through my actions, and I'll do it through my actions, and I'll do it on a journey that will also bring friends with me, people that want to support me and be there. And that was where we started. So we started with London Marathon, then we went from that to Car 10 is 110-mile bike ride across Wales. Then we cycled from Cardiff to Paris. Then we cycled from Paris to Bordeaux. Then we climbed 10 mountains all over 3,000 feet within 24 hours. And then we walked 23 days, a marathon for 23 days consecutively, 780 miles around the Wales coastal path. Finished up end of last month as well. And in that process, we've raised 1.4 million. But the Quicdna project needed 300,000. So we raised. So you didn't undersell me, mate. You got it right. We raised around about 450,000 just for the Quicdna project,
Right.
and that went purely to that project. But because that was a pilot scheme within Wales, the funding had been achieved. The project is launched, and now it's down for the pilot project to move that. ctDNA, liquid biopsy should be part of the cancer pathway.
Right.
In the NHS to bring that as standard practice. So that project had moved on. So again, sticking in that same theme for me about how I can grow through this and what I can help to give to my children through this was establishing a foundation, which is part of Velindre Cancer Centre. It's not its own charity, it's a fund of part of Velindre that my wife will sit on with oncologists and senior doctors from Velindre Cancer Centre. But my dream is that I raise enough money now within the time that I have that my children will be able to be trustees when they're 16.
Okay.
And they can sit on that fund, and they can then work with the oncologists, work with my wife to distribute the money that me and my friends have raised over the last year and the year ahead. And they can be part of the whole dream that I had around helping the next family. And I think there's no better way than to teach them some of the great parts of compassion and enjoying life and helping others than them being part of a fund that their dad established for them to be part of and help distribute that money. So that's what's driving me on now is, I'm at 1.1 million in that fund. I want to get it to 2 million because I feel that will help, keep it out for another 4 years while Isla gets to 16.
Yeah.
And then Zach a bit longer. But that's what's driving me. And I think having that sole purpose and drive there's nothing better. There's nothing that gets me out of bed better than that, really. And knowing that, being clear on what I'm doing and why I'm doing it in the midst of all the darkness, whilst you go there for 10, 15, 20 minutes or a couple of hours, it pulls you out pretty quickly. And knowing I've got that ambition, that dream for them to be part of it, really.
And so it's about legacy, creating that legacy that they can
100%.
continue to be a part of.
Yeah, 100%. I just want them. I just want them to smile when they think about their dad, and I want them also when they're feeling down and dark in the future to think, look what my dad did. My dad. My dad didn't let it defeat him. We were made from the same stuff, and I'm not going to let it defeat me either. And that's what I hope I can give them in my actions.
No, I'm sure.
Words, but
I'm sure that's the case. Sorry, I got a bit emotional there. What was I going to say? what do you anticipate that the fund will actually do in practice?
So the objectives that we've established with it are to support new innovative diagnostic screening and testing processes, not just for lung cancer, for all cancers in Wales. And that's the process. And clearly, my family are non-medical. We've got amazing people at All Wales Genomics, the amazing Moondance Foundation, and Valindra, who will support us in guiding us into the best way to invest that money and to support it. And my dream is that will continue once I'm gone as well. I'm very lucky to have amazing friends that I know will continue to fundraise to support this legacy, and will hopefully help other cancers and support the cancer pathway. Because, Peter, I don't know about yourself, but there is nothing else I've seen that rips through families like cancer. As a disease that's so common and it's so scary. I was naive to it as such before I was diagnosed, but when you actually spend time and just seeing how many people it affects,
I met some. Won't tell you who it is, but I met somebody recently whose son died at the age of 9, and the parents divorced within 2 years. It just too painful for them.
It is. I know. So I think it's our responsibility to help, the NHS and help our amazing doctors and nurses to fight back against this disease, because it's it's terrible. It really is.
And what do you think would happen? I mean, because the NHS is doing an amazing job, and what happened with you was of no fault of anyone, as you said, in the system. Why do you think that such a fund that you're doing needs to be there in order to help this? Like, what gap is there in the system that this fund is plugging, if you see what I mean?
I think there's a bit of the only way I'm doing it differently is I'm trying to fund specific projects, so specific projects that target the pathway. There are many other charities that are doing way more than myself and far greater work. Again, I've referenced them many times, the Moondance Foundation, and they're doing amazing, amazing things. But for me, it's a way of helping a little bit, and I'm realistic to that. It may only be a little bit, but it's better than nothing in my eyes. If I can do my little bit to support that journey, then I will, and I can, and also bring my family on that journey. So I'm realistic that I'm not going to solve any big major problems, but if I can just support 1% or even just help one family and, from the fund, then job done for me. I'm happy there, really.
And Peter, what, in the same way, what do you hope? What's your equivalent of Craig's legacy concept around the fund and things like that? Like, what's your sort of equivalent in that respect?
Yes, so I'm doing it a very different way. I did think about that. I mean, initially how I was going to help the cancer community. Of course, that then got taken over 9 months later by suicide. So I've spent a lot of time, raised £60,000 after Alan's death, which half went to Papyrus, which is a suicide charity for young people, for people under 35. Suicide is the most common cause of death for any male underneath the age of about 40. It used to be accidents, of course, car accidents, motorbike accidents, but it's now a suicide. And so I've put the effort into that in terms of money, time. There's a donation from each sale of each book to Papyrus. I'm on the finance committee. The Three Dads Walking, does that mean anything to you?
Yes, yeah.
They're starting. Andy Airy, who's one of the Three Dads, is the chair of my subcommittee, and they're starting tomorrow on their third walk, actually, from somewhere in Scotland down to Norwich, actually. And their book, Three Dads Walking, is launched in May, June time. So I've put a lot of effort into that, and although I have spent some time with the Royal Castle Lung Cancer Foundation, I really focused on that. So rather than raising money, at the moment anyway, I want to influence and make change by people reading the book and being inspired by it, and obviously learning from it and making some changes in life. And I've got, as it says in the preface, I'm hoping 600 people will read it, because it's taken about 600 hours to write it, and I would happily give
that's the trait.
1 hour. That's my really numbers brain working on that. But if I can get it up into the thousands or tens of thousands, it's not done for nobody makes money out of books except unless they're called J.K. Rowling or Shakespeare or something. It's all to do with consumption and being inspired by it. So that would be my legacy, I hope.
And so, on that note, where do people find the book? Public Success, Private Grief.
It is. It's on Amazon. You can pre-order it on Amazon. They'll be starting to ship it from 11 p.m. tonight for some reason. Don't know why it's 11 p.m. and not midnight. Okay. That's what they tell me. And there's a few hundred books sitting there. If you're abroad, then you can buy it via our website, ps-pg.com. We'll put those in the show notes anyway. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Cool. So with the last couple of minutes, guys, I just want you to, do you have any particular phrase or motto or anything that you kind of go to get you through the tough times, of which I'm sure there are many, that you continually return to, that you think would be valuable for others to potentially hear? I don't know, Peter, do you want to start?
Not really.
Craig, an alternative might be anything that for anyone listening, what you think people should be focused on in terms of what really matters with the time that we have available.
Certainly living life to the full. Don't procrastinate. All the things that we're told have been told for years and years and years. Told by the parents, which we ignored, etc. Just get on with it and embrace life, because you just don't know, do you?
Right.
Yeah, exactly the same. The cliches are there for a reason. Life is short, and don't waste every second. They're true. They are. And that's the scary thing about it. For me, it's not waste every second is where I tried to come to. But I think the other beautiful thing that has happened throughout my process has been the people around me. And I think that people don't realize how much of an impact they make on helping you. And it's a small thing for them, or a small gesture, or, I just did this walk around Wales where I had 600 people come and join. For some of them, they came along, they walked for 8 hours, they gave time up in their day. It wasn't a big deal for them. It was a massive deal for me. Having their support, having them come along, give me their love, their energies, take away time from their family, just an arm around you. I can never truly put into words how amazing people are and how incredible. When you take away all the rubbish, people are amazing, and they've got me through this last 2 years. They've been incredible.
Here.
Right. Well, on that note, thank you so much for coming on, both of you, and thank you so much for your openness in discussing the issues and situations that you've been in. I hope all of our listeners can appreciate it. And so, Craig, quickly, where do they go if they want to contribute, if they want to make a donation?
www.maxwell.foundation. That's our website, and have a look, and we'd love any support we can.
Great. And then it's Public Success, Private Grief from 11 p.m. tonight. So thank you very much to everyone listening. We'll be back again next week.